All right, we will begin. This is our March the 4th, 2025 Principal Advisory Council, and we will begin by turning it over to our Commissioner of Education, Dr. Robbie Fletcher.
First of all, welcome to everyone, and it's so good to see people online at this point, but also too visiting some classrooms and see students try to get back to a normal schedule. So I hope everyone on this call that you've been able to have a few days with students in the building, and hopefully, as we move forward, that we'll have some normal days to come and try to get this school year finished out. But I will say that this has been a very unusual year. I don't have to tell the people on this call that, but we've had everything from hurricane winds to, snows to flooding that was rivaled the 1977 floods in Eastern Kentucky. So we've had a lot of different things. And even if you go down I-75 with the shooter incident that happened back in the fall, we just had so many different issues that have cost us some time. But it's good to have our students back in class. I was able to visit a couple of districts, Pikeville Independent. Last week, I visited there on Friday. That was their second day back in school. They were out of school where Pikeville Independent had been flooded. They were out all the way for 8 days. So it was good to see. I told the superintendent, David Trimble, there that the students seemed a little more happy, a little more lively than just to be back in a normal schedule. Then also too, I was able to ride around with Mr. Freddie Bowling, who is the superintendent of Pike County. We went to Shelby Valley High School, where they were using that as basically as a base for disaster relief. And there was a group there, I think they were called Master Chefs, and they were going to leave this week. By the time they were leaving, they estimated they would have given out 36,000 meals. It's just hard to believe. But also, too, you had disaster relief from the Southern Baptist Convention. And that was just in Shelby Valley. That didn't include the issues all throughout the county. We've had so many districts throughout the state that have had some flooding issues and we're struggled to get back in. But again, just our hearts and thoughts go out to those that may have lost loved ones, lost their homes as they get back. But very thankful that we're seeing people get back into a normal schedule. I think Pike County is scheduled to have maybe a teacher learning day on Friday, then have students back on Monday, March 10th. So they've been out for a few weeks. So again, thankful for that. Also, too, from the commissioner standpoint, it's been a very busy time. I made a comment before. I'm so thankful that this was a short session for the commissioner's first session as in this role. But again, a lot of great meetings, a lot of opportunities to build bridges and build relationships with our legislators. I'm not saying we always agree, but I will say we're having a lot of contact, a lot of conversations, a lot of productive conversations with our legislators, and very thankful for that. So, I had several meetings, not only as commissioner, but also several within the department. We've been asked about different bills. We've been asked about having input on different parts. So I'm very thankful for that. As I mentioned a little bit earlier before we got on here, I think we're tracking somewhere around the neighborhood of 200 bills that are education related only. So that's a lot of time. I think Cassie Trueblood will be giving us an update a little bit later as it relates to all of our updates when it comes to the legislative updates. Thank you. I will mention one thing. If you haven't looked at this, we're very excited to have worked with Senator Higdon on Senate Bill 253. And what we would look at is providing a dual credit for students that are in an educator rising or a teaching pathway, but move on into the post-secondary into a college. And essentially what would happen is that a prospective teacher could go all the way through and have their degree tuition free. So we're looking at some work there with 253, looking forward to that. But it really also incentivizes local districts to have their grow your own programs in full effect and having those teacher pathways. So very excited for that, and also thankful for those of you that are allowing students to come and work in your buildings from the high school, or those that are high schools that have students part of a teaching pathway. Thank you for your work in that. A couple other items, just finished up our town halls, and within the next 2 weeks, we're working on our model framework 3.0 for the next accountability model. You'll be able to see that pretty soon. We've taken the input from those town halls, and we should have another product ready to go it'll be model framework 3.0, and we'll be taking that to LSAC. We'll also take it to the Cool Council for their input. and then seeing how we can move forward as it relates to accountability. I will say, if you've been a part of any of those town halls, thank you for being there first and foremost. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the input. But also, too, if you're a district that has presented at one of these, there's so many great things going on across the Commonwealth that we need to share, and we need to make sure that we're working with each other. And I'm so thankful for the efforts that so many districts are putting into working together on developing local accountability. So very excited for that. And the last thing I'll say is we do have All In for Ag that's coming up March 17th to the 21st, which we're promoting agriculture in all of our elementary schools. This was a joint effort with Agriculture Commissioner Jonathan Schell, also Lieutenant Governor. There was just so much excitement on the agriculture side from Jonathan Schell when he came in and started presenting what his vision was, and then how we could help with the Kentucky Department of Education to make that vision a reality. But there's so many jobs, there's so many aspects of our lives that are affected by agriculture. The careers that are available, I think, would open a lot of students' eyes, whether it be in technology, drone operators, or maybe even the equipment that's used nowadays in farming. But also, too, scientists, economists, all those that are necessary part of making our agriculture system as great as it is today. So again, very excited for that. It's March 17th through the 21st. So, Ms. Noah, that's all my updates. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer any. I will say that I do have a meeting in the Capitol Annex in a little bit. I'll be here for a while, but Dr. Tucker will be filling my shoes very easily, I might say. He does such a great job. So Dr. Tucker will finish out the meeting. I do plan to be here for at least a half hour to 45 minutes. So at this point, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those. If not, back to you, Ms. Noah.
Okay, thank you so very much. And I will turn it over to our chair, Brian Ehrenberg.
Hello, welcome. Wanted to say, hope you guys have enjoyed the last little bit. I'll say the last 2 days of weather that we've had to enjoy. I think it's been pretty nice here. Hopefully that's a sign of what's to come. I do need to go ahead and start with roll call. And so we do have to ask that you unmute and you state that you are here so we can copy that down and have that on record. And also I'll start with Jared Hankins.
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Thank you. Robert Lightning. Lynn Petrie.
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Thank you. Liz Kirk.
Yes, I am present.
Thank you. Gecko Ross. And I said that wrong again, I'm sure. Mr. Blythe is here.
But in a meeting.
Gotcha. Okay. Sarah Williams.
I'm here.
Thank you. I did get a message. I think Mr. Klein said he was going to be late.
I'm here. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, perfect. Even better. Amanda Noakes.
Here.
Thank you. Amanda Fields.
Here.
Thank you. Martina Skidmore.
I'm here.
Thank you. Heather Roden.
Here.
Thank you. And Hubert Schroeder.
Here.
Thank you. And I do believe we have a couple of guests with us today that I wanted to mention. Here we have from Western Kentucky University, Nicholas Brake.
I'm here. Thanks for
Thank you.
inviting us.
Yeah, happy to have you. And then from Campbellsville University, we have Joseph Rocky Wallace.
And I'm here. Thanks for letting us be with you today.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. All right. Next thing we have is our agenda approval. And again, I will need you to unmute to make a motion so that we know who's speaking. If you could also say your name, that would be excellent so it can be documented. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda at this time.
Motion to approve, Liz Kirk.
Thank you, Ms. Kirk. Do we have a second?
Tim Klein, second.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I know it would be so much easier to be able to do the chat, but we have to do it verbally. So I appreciate you guys unmuting and joining in. So it looks like now we are on to the legislative updates with Cassie Trueblood. I'll go ahead and turn it over.
We need to do the summary minutes before we advance.
Oh, just kidding. I jumped in.
It's okay. No
I'm trying to
problem.
move us along here. Okay, we need to approve the summary minutes. So there is a link in the slides. You're welcome to open that up. But again, we need to have a motion and a second. So I will entertain a motion to approve the summary minutes.
Amanda Fields, I'll second.
I don't know if I heard a first, but I heard a second. Amanda, did we have a first?
Tim Klein, I'll make a motion.
Okay, so we had, sorry. We had Tim Klein first and second was Amanda. Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
So,
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Okay, now let me try that again. We are on to legislative updates. Cassie Trueblood, please go ahead and take over. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for having me this morning. As Commissioner Fletcher mentioned, this is a short session, although it doesn't feel like it. There's a lot floating out there right now. We are on, and Stacey, do I have the ability to move through the slides, or do you do that?
I can do it on my side. I can give you control though, if you want to do your own.
If you don't mind to just advance to the next slide, please.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you. So yes, this is a short session, which means that it is a 30-day session. However, we are on day 21 of that 30-day session. With that, we are seeing a lot of bills out there. There are over 1,000. I think the number was 1,084, which is a pretty hefty number for a 30-day session. So we will see what next year's 60-day session brings us. But with being on day 21, after today, there are only 9 legislative days left. So there's going to be a lot of movement in those next few days. So the concurrence period is set for March 13th and 14th, so that is at the end of next week. And they are going to need to pass any of those more controversial bills, any that they expect the governor to veto before March 15th, because then we have the veto period that runs from March 15th through the 26th. And then the last 2 legislative days, they will come back on March 27th and 28th. To pass any last minute legislation and also to have the possibility to override any vetoes that the governor may have issued during that veto period. Any legislation that's passed in those last 2 legislative days for an initial passage, that is still subject to the governor's veto, and they would not have the ability to come back and override that. So we are anxiously awaiting March 28th, probably about midnight when they adjourn. To see what bills have passed from this session. Now, I did drop some links in the chat for you because I feel like probably the best way that I can provide you information today is to give you some resources to allow you to follow along in the session. Because as we are going to move quickly through these next 9 days, any updates that I give you today are likely going to be outdated by this afternoon because of the next actions that are going to be taken by the General Assembly. So next slide, please, Stacey. This year with the House Education Committee, we did see that committee split into 2. Previously, we just had an Education Committee in the House and an Education Committee in the Senate. The Senate did retain 1 Education Committee, but the House has split into the Primary and Secondary Education Committee and a Post-Secondary Education Committee. The Post-Secondary Education Committee did meet this morning, and that is chaired by Representative James Tipton, who previously chaired the House Education Committee, and also Representative Shane Baker is the vice chair. For the Primary and Secondary Education Committee, we have educators Scott Lewis chairing that committee and Representative Mike Kleins as the vice chair. Next slide, Stacy. So here are some links which I have also dropped into the chat for you to help you follow along with the committee schedule that will show you when the various committees of the House and the Senate meet. Bills are going to a committee and have to pass out of a committee before they make their way to the chamber floor. While the education committees are most likely going to be the most relevant to the bills that you are looking to follow, we are seeing that bills are being assigned to other committees. For example, this morning, Dr. Brewer and I attended the Senate Committee on Families and Children because they were hearing Senate Bill 181 from Senator Tishner, which would put some requirements regarding the use of traceable communication systems. But we also have there linked for you how to watch those committee meetings as well as the chambers themselves. I personally find the LRC YouTube channel to be the easiest to navigate because it does have the different recordings set out by the various committees. And then also there at the bottom is a link to how to follow the various bills from this session. And that link takes you to the landing page for the 2025 regular session. Next slide, please, Stacy. And this is what that landing page will look like if you are to follow that link, which is also available for you in the chat there. And this really breaks down all of the actions from the session. So in that first column, you have the Senate. The middle column there, you have the House. And under these, you're able to click on the links to Senate bills. If there's a particular Senate bill that you want and you know the number, you can just click on that and then click on the number of the bill under that link. Same thing with the House. There's also the ability to see all of those bills by title and by sponsor. And then if you don't know the bill number, which is very hard to memorize those when there's over 1,000 of those floating around, under that third column, under miscellaneous, where you see bills and amendment index headings, that breaks down the bills into the various subject matters that we are seeing this session. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Stacy. So under here, this is the link for all of those bills under the education, elementary and secondary index heading. This is obviously only a portion of that. If you go and follow the link, you will be scrolling much further to see those various sections. But this will help you know what is out there under those headings. Next slide, please, Stacy. And then when you are clicking on the various bills, this will take you to a landing page for the bill. Now, what I have on the screen is House Bill 190, because I do believe that was one that this committee had asked for specifically. But House Bill 190 is an act relating to advanced educational opportunities. So when you come to that landing page, this is going to give you all of the relevant information on that bill. It gives you a link to the bill as it was introduced, and it tells you the last action. So you'll see right now, this one is still in the House, so it's still in its original chamber. It has already been before the House Education Committee, and it did receive a committee substitute, which we are seeing with a lot of the bills out there, that there is some substitute when they are before committees. But this gives you a summary of the original version of the bill. And then if you can go to the next slide, please, Stacy. And this would be, as you would scroll down on that screen, you would be able to see the actions, the breakdown of those, as well as the link to the committee substitute. So this committee substitute does still deal with advanced coursework and places requirements on the local board as well as the Kentucky Board of Education regarding that. This bill has been posted for passage since last week. They did not ultimately take that action last week, So we'll see how it moves forward this week. Just as a reminder, anything that does pass out of one chamber then has to go to the next. And when it is assigned to the next one, it will then go from there and have an assignment to a committee and have to have those 2 readings on the floor of the next chamber. With that, as I mentioned, we have 9 legislative days following today. So there's going to be a lot of bills moving and moving quickly. Following the session, the department does review all of the bills that have been passed, and we will be issuing guidance to stakeholders regarding how to implement those, what is going to be required of districts, as well as what is going to be required and what next steps are going to happen from the department. With that guidance, that is issued by the department, so it has review by all of the various offices to make sure that everything is covered in that. That guidance, we don't have an official date on when that will be released, but typically it comes out in 2 parts. The first part is in regards to those emergency bills, so those bills that became effective immediately. And then the second part will address those bills that did not contain an emergency clause, which become effective 90 days following the session, which we're looking at that being towards the end of June. So I did mention to Stacy that that is probably a good thing for this committee to put on the June agenda, is to look at that guidance from the department that will break down the 2025 regular session. But that is what I have for you today. Is there any questions?
One question I was going to ask, I don't know what the specific numbers are, but the one that was talking about the makeup time, and the days or adding minutes to the day up until June 4th or something. Can y'all give any updates or information on that one? Is it still in there or what it's looking like?
So
Cassie,
that one,
I can tackle that one for you if you like.
thank you.
That one deals with, we have right now, the way the bill reads is a district can move from the 170-day requirement to the 1,062 hours. So with that 1,062 hours, that if a district has extended their day or will be extending their day, and they cannot meet the 1,062 hours by June 4th, then they can request from the commissioner essentially 5 calamity days, which I could waive up to 5 instructional days, if you will. So that would be a request to the commissioner. There's also added into that 5 disaster relief days. So those 5 disaster relief days would allow districts to essentially do an NTI-like type day, but that would only be something moving forward. So right now, more than likely, like if it passed within the next couple of days and had the governor's signature, it would be Pike County, I think, is the only district that we have right now that's out of school. So unless there was more flooding, more snow, and we're hoping that there's not, those 5 additional NTI days would be something that people could use. Now, there was a floor amendment that was filed by Senator Titchener that would essentially remove those 5 days. And so that has caused that bill, if it passes on the floor, and I'll have to get, Cassie, has that been on the floor yet, or do you know?
So that one it has been retained in the orders of the day. So it has not yet been voted in the Senate. I did just link that bill. That is House Bill 241. And so that link is available in the chat.
Thank you so much for that, Cassie. I appreciate that. But anyway, if the Senate were to vote with the amendment, then it has to go back to the House. The House could either vote or deny. And then if they deny it, then there's going to be some type of concurrence that they'd have to meet to see if they could come at some type of agreement. So again, the 5 NTI days would be very helpful, but really the 1,062 hours is the biggest part of that bill that is most important. So again, that's where it is. And again, thank you to Ms. Trueblood for putting in the connection there. The link for House Bill 241.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because we were like, right now we're just sitting in a weird spot to where we've had 1 day added to our school year because we ran out of the NTI days. So we're wondering if we're going to have to move graduation, because our practice has always been it's the Friday after the last day of school. And so we were wondering if it was looking like we were going to be able to, do the 1,062 hours instead of the 170 days like you're talking about. That's essentially what our district was looking at in Webster County. So we'll keep an eye on it and I'll let them know the updates. I appreciate it.
Very welcome. And again, the 1,062 hours from the 170, I think, is what would benefit most districts across the Commonwealth. Now, that's the only bill that I have some background on. Everything else Cassie can handle. So
Well, if there are no more questions, I will thank Ms. Trueblood for coming in and helping us out. I know other principals are like myself. We are fielding questions about the different bills that are in, and just having a place where we can click on a link. I appreciate that greatly, rather than having to go fish through web pages to find it ourselves. So I appreciate it, and this will answer some questions for my own staff. So thank you for being here, and we will likely add it to the agenda if it's not already on the June agenda, to go back and have that update for guidance from KDE on what happened during the session. So thank you so much. All right, next we have our needs of school principals, Mr. Wallace and Mr. Brink.
So Nick and I represent UPPI, which is a higher education ed leadership PLC with KDE. And Stacy leads that and does a great job. We meet about 8 times a year. We met with Dr. Fletcher recently to ask if we could join this group so we can stay up to speed on what you folks are doing and what you folks say that you need. Along with that, so we do appreciate having a chance to be with you quarterly, and at least one of us will be with you every 3 months. So again, a thank you to KDE for allowing us to do this. So KDE has also asked us, along with this opportunity, to do research here in Kentucky on the needs of principals. So we have a white paper we're working on. We're going to be sending out surveys, and this is just an update to give back to EPSB, and I'm sure they'll pass it on as a white paper to show current needs. There's research going on, obviously, all the time, all around the country. The Wallace Foundation, many other agencies give us really good updates on what you folks need. But here in Kentucky, your customized needs, we're hoping to be able to zero in, and maybe this white paper will help in some way you folks down in the trenches. Nick, have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered it, Rocky. Thank you. We're really just looking at how we can adapt and change the way we deliver instruction. We're doing some things with apprenticeships, and so we're here to learn and to make sure that what we're doing really meets the needs that you see in the school level. Thanks, Rocky, and thank you for letting us be here.
And I want to add one thing. I see a Boyd County principal facilitating this meeting. That's my alumni district. That's my home district in Boyd County. I was at Catlettsburg as principal a few years ago.
Well, we appreciate the shout out here. I know that coming from Boyd County, it's never dull. You know, we're right on the cusp of all the other states around us, Ohio and West Virginia. So we get a little bit of everything over here. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys coming out and speaking with us, and we welcome you to these meetings. And hopefully, this creates a nice little relationship we can build into each other and use iron to sharpen iron here. All right, that takes us next to effective transitions, student transitions, and updated Title I parent and family engagement guidance with Erin Suddeth.
Hi, thanks for having me today, everybody. My name is Erin Suddeth, and I'm the program manager for the Title I Part A Support and Improvement branch here at KDE. So let's talk first about student transitions. Title I Part A, if you don't know, it's part of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, and that was last amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015. So if you hear ESEA or ESSA, that's kind of the same thing, talking about programs like Title I. And Facilitating student transitions is referenced several times throughout Title I Part A, and I've kind of summarized those for you here. We've got district support for the participants in early childhood as they move to kindergarten in Title I programs, school strategies for assisting preschool kids in transition to school programs. So the district has a responsibility and the schools have a responsibility for that. And then finally, district strategies to facilitate transitions for our older students from the middle grades to high school to whatever post-secondary pathway they are pursuing. All right, next slide. Our office releases a monthly Title I newsletter, and we also host a monthly webinar. We've got most of our information tends to be geared towards the district Title I coordinator. But one thing that we've started including recently that we're really excited about is an article in the newsletter that we're calling Principal's Perspective. And we try to make sure that that article is really geared towards principals at Title I schools, information that they can use. And in our February newsletter, we had an article in there about effective transition. So that's kind of what got me here. So hopefully our district coordinators are sharing that out with principals, or if anybody on here is at a Title I school and you want to subscribe, just let me know. I'll add you to that list. And we also post those on our webpage, and they stay up there for a year, so you can go back and look at those anytime. The Title I Part A application that each district completes and submits to KDE for approval includes questions regarding transitions. So the districts provide us with a general overview on the application, and we do like to hear more about these supports during our consolidated monitoring visits when we get to come out and see what you're doing at your schools. These events and activities for student transition do typically occur at the school level, so it's probably going to be the school's responsibility to maintain a lot of that documentation. And just some suggested methods of documentation for your different transition activities. A written plan, that's always a helpful piece of evidence for almost any program requirement, including student transitions. And this doesn't have to be anything really fancy, just kind of a narrative or a bulleted list about what the district or the school actually does related to these transitions. These plans are also really useful in the event that a new person moves into a role, or maybe somebody gets sick and somebody else needs to fill in for them. We hear that all the time. So it's good to have those things in place to kind of have that uninterrupted service. And evidence that any sort of transition activities or meetings took place is also really useful. So that could include invitations, flyers, advertising these events. Those can be paper, electronic, both are fine. Maybe agendas or talking points, sign-in sheets. If there's any information that was shared out, like a handout or a PowerPoint, you want to hang on to all of those types of things. Right, next. I think I've got some example transition activities, just some stuff that we typically see. So of course, with our kindergarten, we see a lot of kindergarten camps and jump start programs. So a lot of times these include time for diagnostic assessments. They allow students to familiarize themselves with the school and the classroom and the bus, all of those things that are going to be brand new to them, as well as informational sessions for parents. And then as our older students transition into higher grades, we need to think about how they're being prepared for not only the increased academic expectations, but also the changing social dynamics of those upper grades. They're going to be moving between more classes throughout the day. They're probably going to be in a bigger building. Classes are probably going to be larger, and they'll have a heavier course load, taking on more responsibility and ownership. So there's just a lot going on that we need to help them prepare for. Another thing we see is having older students mentor and work with the younger students. That can be a really great support. So not only are the younger students receiving guidance, it's always kind of cool for them to get to hear from the older kids. And then they have some friendly faces when they go to their new school, people that they've already met. And then as an added bonus, the older students serving as the mentors are really practicing their leadership skills. So definitely a win-win. We know that there are a variety of paths that students may take after graduation. So inviting representatives from colleges, military, local employers, those are all great ways to provide direct answers to questions that students might have. But there are other things that schools can be doing to help prepare students to enter the real world. So we like to encourage schools to think about how they can support students in maybe honing those soft skills that future employers are going to value. A lot of students are also going to be on their own for the first time. So maybe some transition activities could include information on financial responsibility, budgeting, practicing their time management, all of those kind of things. Right. And next, I would love to hear from some of you at the school level, if you don't mind sharing. So if anybody wants to share how your school supports effective student transitions, this could be preschool to elementary, elementary to middle, middle to high, high school to post-secondary, or even we see things, between the grade levels at the same school, maybe moving from primary to intermediate.
I don't mind to jump in here. I like to tout our house system every chance I get. So we utilize a house system here similar to the Ron Clark Academy, but we do some activities with intent to create an environment where new students feel welcomed. And so we have house meetings weekly, but within those house meetings, it was a logistical nightmare getting kindergarten and first grade everywhere they need to go effectively with 360 kids. And so we buddied up our 4th and 5th graders with our K1s. And so right away they get an older buddy, like you were talking about, that they can mentor. They meet with them weekly, and it cut down on a lot of issues with kids with separation anxiety, with problems maybe with fear walking the hallways, things that you run into with littles that it immediately addresses those issues and makes them feel at home, makes them part of a small family within our larger family. So I think it's been a fantastic opportunity for our kids. And then we also take it a step further with our 5th graders, with our 4th graders. We do a leadership academy for those students to create a council for our 5th graders. And so they're involved in every aspect of the school. If we present before the board, if we are just welcoming parents in the building, they're the first faces you see here. And it just creates a little ownership of the building, how our kids are able to highlight what they do here. I think has been a game changer for our population, at least. So
yeah, we were in Boyd County last year for monitoring, so we got to hear all about the house system. It sounded like a lot of really good things going on there. Does anybody else have any student transition information you'd like to share, or any questions?
So we are a traditional 9-12 high school, and we do some transition activities. And we're probably one of the few, but we also do a house system in a high school model because we do so many like pep rallies and contests and stuff between grade levels. And so what we did on that, our slogan is like 8 houses, but 1 family. So we have the houses each have 9, 10, 11, and 12th graders, because at all of our events, they compete. And so instead of having grade levels competing like seniors against freshmen, they have houses that can have different representatives. So it makes it a little more competitive. And we've done some academic stuff in there as well. Attendance awards, each week we announce which house attendance was the best the previous week. We do a GPA award for house. And at the end of the year, we have a big challenge trophy. I just made a gaudy, ugly trophy out of a bunch of old trophies that we had, and it has like athletic tape with the title on it, a big gold cup on the top. So we do some things like that, but we also do kind of some more, I guess you'd say, official. So one thing that's convenient about our campus, we're literally the same school because it's in an old wing of our high school that we added, and that wing that was originally going to be torn down, they remodeled it, gutted it, and made that our middle school. So it's really easy for them. We do an event called Hello WCHS, to where our youth council out of the Frisk office, her leadership committee that she does, they tour the 8th graders around to the different parts of the building. And then over the summer, when we do a freshman orientation, that same group does an initial house challenge activity where they do games and tug of war and stuff like that. And so they get kind of that taste of the houses while doing the transition activity for orientation. And that's the day that they get their Chromebooks and things like that. So we do several activities like that. Another thing that we're doing this year is in the days of digital and everything online, we kind of went away from having our parent night for freshman scheduling because no one comes. But last year there was a lot of people griping about it on social media, so we said it again. And so we may still have no one to come, but I told them, we have to do our part. And if we're not offering it, then they can bash us. But if we offer it, and unless people come, then they can't say we didn't do it. So we're going to do that this year because we've been doing some scheduling conversations with WKEC. They've been kind of helping us through a process. So we have individually, our leadership team is 6 people, and we've individually met with all of our returning students for next year. And we're going to do the same thing with the freshmen at that incoming scheduling night. So we've individually cancel them and set their schedule for next year. So a lot of those things seem to be helping with some of our transition because scheduling otherwise is a nightmare when they have all the freedom to make all the mistakes. But when they sit there with a school leadership team member and went through each class individually and made all those schedules, it should really help our 2 counselors when they go to build that.
Awesome. And we've got some stuff in the chat too about opportunities for our older kids. So I was jotting some of these down because we always get questions. What are they doing at other schools? So that's great. All right. We want to move on to the parent and family engagement guidance. Right, so I've got a link in here to the recently updated parent and family engagement non-regulatory guidance from the U.S. Department of Education. So this just came out, I think, at the end of January. It originally came out in April 2004, so it was definitely due for an update. A lot of the content actually has remained the same. There's a lot of technical updates to just make sure that the guidance reflects the requirements of ESSA as opposed to No Child Left Behind. A big thing was updating all of the actual citations. This requirement moved from section 1116 to 1118. So if you are a Title I school and you have any Title I policies or anything, you might take a look at those and make sure you've got 118 instead of 116 on any parent items. So if you're not familiar with non-regulatory guidance documents, they are structured kind of in an FAQ format, and they just really help break down the language from the law into more easy to understand terms for the rest of us. They also try to really distinguish what is required by law. So we're going to look for the word must, and what's considered to be a best practice, looking for words like recommended, suggested, or strongly recommended. Sometimes there are example scenarios also included in these documents, which can be really helpful. And in this particular one, the appendices have some interesting information. There is a quick reference table outlining the parent and family engagement requirements and then indicating who's responsible. Is it the state education agency, the district, or the school? So that's just a really nice thing you can quickly glance at. They also have templates for parent and family engagement policies, notifications, and compacts. I'd also like to plug that on our KDE Title I webpage, we have templates and samples of these resources as well, and I'll tell you where to find those in a minute. The guidance itself, I've sort of broken down on the slide the areas that will probably be of most interest to principals. The first 2 sections are really pretty legalese heavy and more for the state agency, but section C is district responsibilities, D is school responsibilities, and then section E is all about building parent capacity, and that's responsibility shared by the district and the school. All right, next slide. So something I'd like to hear about parent and family engagement is always, it's always an area where there are, can tend to be findings because some of the things are very specific and what has to be included in the wording. And then we always get those questions. How do we get parents to show up? Have you heard of anything great happening at the other schools? So does anybody want to share anything that their school does to build parent capacity? This could be events or just resources that you provide parents.
I'd like to speak to that.
Yeah.
And going back real quick, we do a middle school mingle for transition. So that's really awesome. So I'm like, I just want the kids to feel comfortable here. I want the parents to feel comfortable. So we invite the students in from 9 to noon. And then we have a luncheon with the principal. So parents can come in and join their children with for lunch, and then I'm in there, and that's just kind of a very safe space where they can ask questions, do whatever. But for our family engagement, again, there's a theme here. It's fun. But I wanted folks to feel safe to come in. You know, a lot of our parents haven't had good experiences. And so we made it where it was just very inviting. We have activities set up like paint with your family. We have food trucks come in. We had a lady come in who was designing hats, so students could design a hat with their parents. We also provide food for them too, but we just really wanted to make it an experience where they could come in, engage with staff in a different way, not just academically, because a lot of times we're only getting the parents a lot of times who we don't necessarily need to see. Not that we don't love them, and we don't, not that we don't want to see them, but we really wanted to be able to provide opportunities for our students and to see our staff in a different light as people, and just to really be able to build those relationships. So we went from having maybe 30 or 40 parents attending to this last one that we had in the fall. We had almost 400 people attend. We're pretty excited. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we're really proud of that. Again, we're really strong in building relationships with the students and with the families. So I'm proud of that.
Yeah, that's great. And, you know, you do those relationship building kind of fun activities, and then they're more likely to attend the activities about academics or how they can support their students. So that's great. Does anybody else have any things that you do for building parent capacity?
Much like our students are in houses, it's an expectation at Paducah Middle that our parents are involved in the houses as well. We make them ex officio members of their child's house. And sometimes their own houses are divided as they have multiple children. So they get the opportunity to celebrate in multiple houses, but each one of the houses has an affinity group. For instance, Amistad has the Ami Mommies, Altruismo has the Diamond Divas. Those are moms that help support the school. And then each one of the houses has dads on duty. And we have some safety vests that the dads can come in and they can fall into the school anytime they want. And just walk the halls just as a male presence. They can walk outside, whatever your kind of thing is. I think that sometimes we kind of force parents into a box a little bit and force them to do what we want them to do versus what are your interests? What skill set do you have to be able to help us? So, you know, when it comes down to inclement weather, I have a brigade of dads that after they clear their walkways and paths at their house and at the church, they come over to the school and help our custodians out to make sure that we're ready to reopen when the time comes, and just really making sure that we're matching skill set with the needs that we have at the school.
Yeah. And I like what you said, kind of lends to question number 2 about how you work with parents to design and implement your program. So part of the parent and family engagement program requirements is getting that parent input. So what do they need? What skills do they have? Like you said, how can they help? And just make them really more partners as opposed to kind of a sit and get information. And so in the chat, I see some activities, advisory committees. Yeah, that's always good. And another really good point in the chat is about making sure that communication is not a barrier for parents. And that can be different languages other than English, like we have in the chat. And it can also just be making sure that things written in English are they're written in a manner that is easily accessible for parents. So, you know, avoiding a lot of that jargon that we all are familiar with, but they might not be. So those are great things to think about. All right. We can go to the next slide. I just wanted to share a link to our Title I Part A documents and resources webpage. We have a ton of resources over there. We've got our Title I handbook. We've also got a sample documents folder that's got some different customizable notifications and templates that districts and schools can use to help make sure that they're in compliance with all the different requirements of Title I. Our school-wide program monitoring checklist. This is the checklist that we use when we come and visit you. It's got all of the different indicators for requirements. It's also got examples of how you could effectively document that. You could definitely use that even as a self-assessment to make sure that you're on track, saving the things that you're supposed to save. Lots of parent and family engagement resources, including those new templates for policies and compacts that I mentioned, and of course the links to all of our webinars and newsletters. And there's also a little brief description of each one on the webpage, so you don't have to click through and see if there's anything you're interested in there. So definitely check that out. And the last slide I have is just my contact information. I've also got a link to all of our different Title I Part A consultants. We have, I believe, 12 plus me, and each of them handle different districts. So you can always click on that, find the consultant that works with your district if you want to ask specific questions. So don't hesitate to reach out. We'd much rather have people reach out and ask all the questions that they have than, not find out and maybe end up not, being in compliance with a particular requirement. Right. And that is all that I have. So thank you all for having me here.
Thank you, Ms. Sudduth. Appreciate your time. Now we will move to our standards review update with Crystal Rowland and Thomas Klaus.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Crystal Rowland. I'm the Director of the Division of Program Standards in the Office of Teaching and Learning. We're excited to be with you this morning for a standards update. Kentucky Revised Statute 158.6453 established the process for the development of the Kentucky Academic Standards and for the review of those standards. It also set forth a schedule that calls for the standards to be reviewed and revised every 6 years. And so we have several academic content areas that are up for review this year. I want to take a moment to go through the process so that when we talk about the timeline for those areas, it'll make a little bit more sense. So the process kicks off with an application for teachers to apply to be standards writers. And so we have 3 advisory panels, one for elementary, one for middle school, one for high school, and a review committee. And primarily there are teachers who serve on those committees. So if you have had folks that have served as standards writers, we just want to thank you for sharing them with us and sharing time. We know that it's challenging for teachers to be out of the classroom, but they really are critical in this process, and we do appreciate deeply your partnership with that. There are also representatives from higher education who serve on those committees, as well as members of business and community who serve as consultants in the process as well. When the application goes out for standards writers, we also have a public comment survey that is open for 30 days that gathers feedback from the public on the current Kentucky academic standards for that content area. Once that survey closes, the advisory panels come together, they look at that public feedback, they look at current research in the field, and they look at other state standards and recommend revisions to the standards. That then goes to the review committee. They review the work and approve it to move forward. Once that draft is approved, it goes out for another public comment survey period of 30 days where the public can weigh in on what they think about the draft. During that time, we also send out the assessment blueprint for public feedback as well. And that assessment blueprint doesn't have assessment items on it, but it does sort of outline the percentage of items for each of the subdomains in the content area that would appear on the state assessment, and it sort of serves as that blueprint for that design. And so that goes out for public comment around that similar time frame. Once that survey closes, the advisory panel comes back together and they look at the feedback on the draft, recommend final changes, and recommend any needed changes to that assessment blueprint. The review committee approves those final changes, and then it moves forward through some committee presentations. So the next step, it'll go to the Interim Joint Committee for Education. There's a committee called the Standards and Assessment Process Review Committee, and they look at all of the activities for the review of those standards and make sure that it follows the process as designed by law. And then it goes forward to the Kentucky Board of Education for a final approval. When the Kentucky Board of Education approves it, there's about a 6 to 9 month period that it goes through a legislative process before officially being adopted into law. And then it's expected that the revised standards and assessments are implemented no later than 2 years following the process. So with that schedule that was set forth in law, we have 3 content areas that are due to begin the process in 2025. And so reading and writing, we began that process in January of this year. Social studies is set to begin that process in April, and mathematics in the fall. And so our goal is, by separating out the start date for reading and writing and mathematics, that those implementation years for the classroom will be spread out, because we know that that's a heavy ask for self-contained teachers, specifically to learn new standards in reading and writing, as well as in mathematics. And so I'm going to hand things over to Thomas Klaus, branch manager in the Office of Teaching and Learning, to sort of walk us through the timeline for each of those content areas and talk about some resources to support.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Crystal. And so starting off, and again, that foundation that Crystal said is really important for understanding kind of where we're at with each of these standards reviews and revisions. So the Kentucky Academic Standards for Reading and Writing, this is a process that began last fall. So that application for the advisory committees or advisory panels and review committees went out in the fall, as did the feedback survey for the current CAS for reading and writing. Our committee members came together in January, reviewed that public comment, responded to it. The review committee put forth a draft, and that draft went out for public comment. And that is closing March 5th. And then we also have the survey for feedback on the blueprint, the assessment blueprint, that is going to be closed on the 12th. So from there, they'll come back in March. They'll review any additional comment from that second round of public feedback, make suggestions, and put that forward. And we're looking tentatively for that to be presented to the Kentucky Board of Education in October. If you are interested, that assessment survey, assessment blueprint survey is still open. And so we are seeking feedback from any stakeholders, teachers, administrators, students, families, business community, and that public comments. So again, survey is open through March 12th, and there is a link that you can get to access it through that PowerPoint. Social studies is a little bit more at the beginning of the timeline here. So we actually have 2 things open right now. So one, we have our applications for the social studies standards and assessment review committees. So again, that elementary advisory panel, that middle advisory panel, and high school advisory panel, and our review committees. That's open currently, as is feedback on the current Kentucky academic standards for the social studies. And that just opened yesterday. So that'll be open for 30 days. And the goal here is that'll end April 2nd. And we're looking to bring those committees together to start responding to that comment April 28th, 29th, and 30th. Again, if interested, just here's some information about the application for our standards writers. So again, this is open till the 21st, and this application is for teachers who are social studies teachers of record, grades K through 12. And so we have a link to that application in this PowerPoint slide deck. And then also feedback. Again, feedback in this first round is on the current Kentucky Academic Standards for Social Studies. And again, that feedback is for teachers, administrators, students, families, business community members, anybody who has feedback. And I will say within these feedback surveys, standards documents are large documents, but there are multiple entry points into giving feedback. So some people only want to give feedback on certain grade bands or certain subject areas. So it's not that you have to give feedback on everything K through 12. You can choose your own adventure with this feedback and give as much or as little as you'd like. And there's a link to that. And again, that survey is open through April 2nd. A little bit about some additional content areas. So aside from what Crystal mentioned with reading and writing, social studies, and mathematics, we also have health education, physical education, and the visual and performing arts that have gone through this and are going through this process. And so currently with health education and physical education, that second round of public comment just closed. And so we're looking to bring back our advisory panel and review committee at the end of this month to respond to that, and then get that draft of the academic standards for both health and PE to the Kentucky Board of Education beginning in June, at that June meeting. And then our visual performing arts is almost basically to the finish line. So they are a standards area. Their legislative process is complete. They were adopted to law on October 24, and then the classroom implementation will begin for the next year. One of the things that with that implementation beginning, one of the things that our VPA consultant has done is to create some high-level resources to support the field. So one is the Kentucky Academic Standards for VPA at a glance document, and all that is a 1 to 2 page paper that kind of showcases some of the key changes in the VPA document, as well as just like a high-level overview of the architecture. So a really good short document for administrators to look at to kind of understand kind of what the nexus or the praxis of the Kentucky Academic Standards for VPA is. And then there's also the getting to know the CAS for VPA. So this is kind of a module series that kind of accompanies any new standards document that comes out from the Division of Program Standards. And what this is really a module series designed to build knowledge and capacity around the standards and really to capitalize on the opportunity to improve teaching and learning aligned to the Kentucky Academic Standards for Visual Performing Arts. It's a three-session module. Each session will take about 45 to 60 minutes, but really it can be worked to basically best suit the needs of the district or people who are going through that module. Session A is really general information and key components about the visual and performing arts documents. And then B and C go into a little bit more depth about artistic processes and anchor standards, which are introduced in that first section of the module. Really, the ultimate goal here is to build teacher knowledge and efficacy around using the new Kentucky Academic Standards for the Visual and Performing Arts. And again, those are kind of resources that we would accompany with any standards document that's being rolled out. So I'm going to turn it back over to Crystal to wrap us up with a question.
So you were able to see some of the resources we have planned to support visual and performing arts, but looking ahead, we know how critical reading and writing is for our students. And so knowing that those will most likely come to the board towards the end of this school year, we would love your input on what resources you feel like will be helpful for you as principals and also as leading teachers in implementing these new standards. Thomas gave some examples. We'll have an at-a-glance document that gives you a high-level overview of the standards and what has changed within those. We typically do a getting to know the CAS module that can be used if you have an instructional coach or if you're serving as that instructional leader and want to facilitate your teachers in the summer prior to that implementation year around that, or could be walked through by individual teachers if needed. We'll also update our family guides to include any changes in the standards as well. But we would love your input now on what might be important resources or guidance that would support you in implementing those revised reading and writing standards.
I know that for us at least, there are laws we have to utilize, high quality instructional resources, and tying the standards to the various high quality instructional resources I think is helpful based on where you're at, what resource you're using, and how it applies to the standards versus what we've used in the past. And so documents or ways that you can tie those in, I think benefit classroom teachers and principals as a whole.
Agree.
We also used to get like a crosswalk kind of document as here's what you were doing and here's what's new, but maybe not something necessarily like that, but maybe something just highlighting what is new and what stayed the same.
Well, I did forget to put in our contact information at the end, but I'll make sure Stacy has that to communicate out to each of you. You are not bound for feedback only in this moment in time. We always love your input and your ideas and what we can do to help support you and your teachers in implementing the revised standards. And so we just want you to know that if anytime things come to mind, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Crystal and Thomas. Appreciate it. All right, next we have the Kentucky Educator Mentorship Program guidance with Sharon Salzman.
Great, thank you. Stacy, do you have, here we go. Thank you. You can move on to the next one. And the next one, there we go. So I am Sharon Salzman with the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness with the Kentucky Department of Education. And I'm going to talk to you about the Kentucky Mentoring Program, which we call KEMP. So Senate Bill 265 was passed in the 2024 legislative session, and it created the KRS 161031, and that established requiring all school districts to create and implement an induction and mentoring program for new teachers, but also new teachers to a district. So they may have been teaching for 10 years, but they are new to your district, so they also have to go through this. So Section 1 does remove all language of KTIP, which is the old Kentucky Teacher Internship Program. Section 2 has the induction and mentoring requirements, and then Section 2.3 also does an annual reporting that we have to do to the legislatures. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the new teacher induction and mentoring program is to provide a new teacher, whether to the profession or a district, the assistance and support necessary to begin a successful teaching career. You'll have a collaborative relationship throughout the first year of employment. It will also assist new teachers in acquiring a deeper understanding of instructional strategies, teaching techniques, district and building procedures, as well as expectations specific to grade level or subject area assignment. Next, please. So Senate Bill 265 also is the guidance provided to deliver districts an overview of what is required by statute. The districts are currently operating an induction and mentoring program. And the information that is provided in Senate Bill 265 is just pretty much a checkpoint just to make sure that they are can identify their current practices and ensure that the minimum requirements are met. A lot of districts have an induction program that they've already done. They just have to make sure that the requirements, and there are a few, that they meet those requirements in the mentoring program that they already had in place. And there is a lot of flexibility for districts. This is intended to help districts create and implement to improve pedagogical skills, retain new teachers by providing support, and assist new teachers as they transition from pre-service to a professional career. Next slide, please. So here are the required components, and somehow it looks like it got out of whack a little bit, but they have to do an orientation program. They have to assign a mentor to the new teacher within the first 2 weeks of them teaching. A support team. They also have to do workshops and training and professional development for the new teacher and for the mentor, and have to provide opportunities for the new teacher and mentor to meet, provide a network of teachers, and also have a formative and summative evaluations. So those are just the required components of Senate Bill 265. Next slide, please. There are also rubrics and evaluations. The rubrics shall describe practice with different levels of performance. And the categories of evidence are multiple measures of student learning, observations, and any other additional relevant evidence that the district deems fit. And evaluations shall include new teacher self-assessment, professional goal and plan, implementation of the plan, and then again, formative and summative assessments. Next slide. So the roles of the mentor, I'm not going to go through every single one of these. Stacy has the PowerPoint, and I'm sure she will send it out to everybody. But there are several slides that we're going to talk about with what is required of the mentor, the new teacher, the administrator, and so on. So if we can go on to the next slide. And again, this is the responsibilities of the mentor. more responsibilities of the mentor. And here are the ones that you all were probably more anxious to learn about. And these are the roles of the administrator. So they facilitate the process of mentorship. They inform the mentors and new teachers about the process and the program. They use of time and resources for the mentorship program. And then they assign and approve the mentorship partnerships early in the school year. At a minimum, mentors must be assigned within 2 weeks of teaching. Next slide, please. Responsibilities of the administrator. They are to assist teachers new to the district from a pool of mentors with emphasis to building proximity, same subject and or grade level teaming when possible. Again, that is not always possible, but that is where we want to start first, and then we move on from there. You want to orient the entire building faculty regarding the school district's mission and the mentor program's purpose. Recruit individuals to serve as mentors. Match new faculty with mentors based on strengths and needs. So you want to look at your new teachers and your mentors and see where there's a common goal between those two, and that's where you want to assign. If you get to where, some personalities just don't mesh, and if you need to switch out a mentor from a new teacher, that is absolutely allowable and highly suggested. If they're not meshing, then it's not going to be a great experience for either one. And then you'll provide release time or joint planning time for the mentor and new teachers so they can get together and have discussions. Next slide, please. And this is again for the administrator. You'll provide professional learning for mentors and new teachers on coaching, classroom observations, feedback, model classroom visits. And this is where we are talking now about the HQIRs. You'll share resources for professional learning opportunities aligned to meet the specific needs of the mentors and the new teachers. Again, reassign a mentor if necessary. Reflect on the year and offer suggestions to improve the mentor program. Again, districts have a lot of flexibility. So if something's not working, then districts do have the right to change and make adjustments to their mentor program, but they do have to meet those minimum requirements. So just make sure that those are in there, and ensure that the mentor relationship and the evaluation process is seamless and centered on professional growth for new teachers. Next slide, please. And here are the roles and responsibilities of the new teacher. Again, I'm not going to go through and read every single one of these, but they do have to be active participants. They do need to reflect. They need to be willing to seek out help, open to feedback, and willing to observe effective teachers. So you may have a great teacher in your school and you think this teacher, new teacher, is struggling with classroom management, and you've got a great teacher in your school that is really good with classroom management. Allow that new teacher to go into that classroom and observe that teacher. And if possible, have the mentor to go with them. And that way they can have a rich discussion afterwards of what did they see? How can they implement that into their classroom? So that type of thing. Next slide, please. Here again is more roles and responsibilities of the new teacher. They have to participate in regular meetings with the mentor, engage in ongoing professional learning, work collaboratively to prepare for lesson delivery, receive feedback and guidance, and provide input and evaluation of the mentor program. Next slide, please. And then we also have the role of an education cooperative. And here are things that they possibly could help districts and new teachers with. Again, I'm not going to go through and read all of these to save time, but you will have this slide so you can refer back to that. Next slide, please. And then the role of the education preparation provider. Again, these are just some suggestions that we have come up with. Again, there are a whole lot more out there, I'm sure, that you could use in your district to also assist with the new teachers. Next slide, please. And the new teacher evaluation. It is the teacher evaluation requirements are governed by statute and regulation. And these align with the Kentucky Framework for Teaching, which is what we did use back in the old KTIP days. And we are going to continue using the Kentucky Framework for Teaching. And the required components of Senate Bill 265 are integrated within the 4 domains of the Kentucky Framework for Teaching. Next slide, please. And annual reporting. We have to do an annual reporting to the LRC by October 1st. And these are the things that LRC has asked that we report to them. So we will be asking districts for some of this information. Some of this information we have. Others we will be asking districts to assist us in providing the reporting to LRC. And the last slide is our contact information. Again, I'm Sharon Salzman. The director of our division is Todd Davis. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact either myself or Todd, and we will be happy to assist you. Is there any questions, suggestions, comments? All right, back to you.
All right, thank you, Sharon. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Student Wellbeing and Mental Health Initiatives with Christina Weeder.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry, my computer is, I just got back from an appointment a short time ago and my computer is being a little slow, so apologize for the delay. Good morning. My name is Christina Weeder. I'm the director of the Division of Student Success at KDE, and our division has a lot of different school-based mental health and behavior and other school safety related initiatives. So I'm going to try to talk a little bit about some of the school-based mental health supports that our division can provide, and answer any questions that you may have, or if there's other information you'd like me to follow up with, I can do that as well. So next slide, please. Okay, so these are a few of the supports that we have available for training within our division. The Interconnected Systems Framework, I'll talk a little bit about that further, but basically, I think many of you are probably familiar with PBIS, or Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. And so an Interconnected Systems Framework is really training on how you integrate the mental health services that are available within your school or district into that tiered level of support that you're already implementing with PBIS, if you're a PBIS school. And so the training that we provide on that really shows how that integration can happen at the various tiers. So mostly we work with co-ops and school district leads for rolling out this training, so that we can kind of build that capacity at the regional and district level. And so occasionally there might be some times where we do direct training with schools, but we've also found this to be helpful information, just generally speaking, of PBIS, for example, to train folks like bus drivers. So we've had some very successful training with them on some basic PBIS principles, because we know a lot of student behaviors show up on bus routes, and some of our bus drivers are not necessarily have a lot of training on how to manage that. So that's something that you can contact our division to get more information about if that's something of interest to you. Another component, and if you want to move on to the next slide, I have a graphic here about the Youth Mental Health First Aid. So that is some training that we have been rolling out for the past several years. If you think of it like CPR, where you're just doing some basic initial response and then passing off the responsibilities over to a trained professional like an EMT or a medical professional of some sort. This is kind of the same concept. So it's really helping to inform adults about common mental health concerns among youth, how to recognize them so that you can then make those mental health referrals when it's needed. And then it provides a very structured, process that you can follow to create a 5-step action plan for a youth that may be facing a mental health problem or crisis, such as, suicidal ideation or depression. Again, this is another training that has been really popular with some of our classified staff as well as our certified staff, because they oftentimes see these kids outside of a classroom setting and might notice little differences that might not show up in a classroom setting. So this training is a 6.5 hour in-person training. It's instructor led. We provide this training at no cost to school districts. It is obviously a little bit time intensive, but I think the positive feedback that we have gotten from folks who've been trained has been really, I think, helpful for making us realize how valuable this is. And so again, we recommend it for teachers, school staff, coaches. We even do sometimes train community leaders around this. Parents or any adults that work with youth can benefit from this training. Next slide, please. So another thing that we train on is psychological first aid. And so pretty much anything that we train on or provide training on from our division is evidence-based in some way. And so that can help you with meeting different training requirements that you might have at the school or district level. But I think that's one of the reasons that you'll see certain trainings mentioned here that may not include some of the ones that you're familiar with as well, because we always are making sure that these are evidence-based and evidence-informed. And so the psychological first aid is one that we have staff who can come out and do some training on. It has, modules that help children, adolescents, adults, and families deal with the aftermath of a disaster or terrorism. So this is really, again, kind of like that CPR type of approach where you're trying to help with in the aftermath of an immediate crisis. It was developed by the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, which is one of the leaders on nationally as far as resources on working with children who've experienced traumatic events, and also with the National Center for PTSD. So both of those organizations have worked together to develop this training. And it's really designed to reduce that initial stress that's caused by a traumatic event and then help foster that long and short-term adaptive functioning and coping. So especially if you're in an area that's experienced, tornadoes or floods or some other kind of significant event that might affect the community and be traumatic, that's something to think about. Next slide, please. So we have sources of strength. Is there anyone in the group who has sources of strength being implemented in their schools? I don't know if you can raise virtual hands or not, but this is something that has been very, very powerful and popular as well, but a powerful experience for the students and adults who have administered it. So it's an evidence-based elementary and secondary youth mental health promotion and suicide prevention program. And it really tries to engage the natural peer social networks that are in schools among students to create healthy norms and culture to prevent suicide, violence, bullying, and substance misuse. So it does that by really focusing on positive aspects of a student and to increase their well-being, help-seeking, resiliency, coping strategies, belonging. So it really, as the name implies, focuses on those strengths that are already there within students and really building upon them. And so this is really an upstream approach for It was designed for youth suicide prevention to help cultivate those supports or protective factors within students. And so that way that they have, you know, when something happens to them that might be a challenge or traumatic potentially, so when times get hard, they have those strengths to rely on. And so this is a peer-led approach, meaning that our staff this is something we roll out in partnership with the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities. And so we work with them to kind of coordinate this effort statewide. And it entails coming out. This is a school level intervention. So it's one of the few times that we come out and train schools directly. But there are adults that get trained in the model, and then they are the adult advisors for students who are trained. And so the students are really the ones who are kind of developing what the program focuses on. And they're really just there supported by the adults. And this has had, I think anecdotally, you'll hear some very positive feedback from the youth and the adults who have participated in the training and implementation. But I think there's some new data that's come out recently that shows that I think it has reduced suicide attempts by something like 29%, which is really important. We know that youth ages, I think it's 10 to 25, suicide can be the most, or is the second leading cause of death within that age range. So this is something that I think probably many folks are concerned about. And as I mentioned, it really focuses on the positives and the strengths. And so when they do this training, I think from what I've heard from our staff that lead this training, they might not even mention the word suicide in the training of it. It's really focused on that positive piece. And I will share, you know, back when we had, it was 2018, 2019, there was a legislative work group that was formed in the aftermath of the tragedy at Marshall County High School. And the legislature for about 6 months did a listening tour across the state to hear from community members, students, families, school staff about, you know, what was going on in their communities. And I will say that I personally witnessed some students from a school district near Marshall County who they had been implementing this program for a little while following the death of one of their students by suicide. And the best friend of that student had been participating in the Sources of Strength program and talked about how meaningful participation in this program was, and that if it hadn't been for this program, they might have gone down the same path as their friend. And I could see in subsequent meetings that the legislators were really moved by his experience and his testimony. And I personally believe that's why we saw so much focus on psychological safety and mental health in the School Safety and Resiliency Act that was eventually passed. So all that's of course not exclusive to Sources of Strength, but I think that the power of this program has been evident to lots of folks who've implemented it, as well as other even legislators who recognized how valuable this can be and the impact that it can have on the student body, as well as the families and the adults in their lives. So next slide, please. So hopefully most of you have heard about trauma-informed practices for educators. Or sometimes people refer to it as trauma-informed care, but looking at trauma-informed care specifically through an education lens is why we refer to this as trauma-informed practices for educators. And as you probably know, every district is required to have a trauma-informed plan for implementing a trauma-informed approach in all of their schools. And so while it's not necessarily a requirement, it is certainly a best practice to be working toward for each school to have their own trauma-informed plan. Again, that's not a legislative requirement, but if you think about it from a implementation standpoint at a district level, Every school is going to have different needs, different resources, and so it can be helpful to really have something at a school level that captures all of that, and it's reflected in a plan that you have for implementing trauma-informed approaches in your particular school. And so we have staff in our division who can provide training on this, but we also partner with the UK Center on Trauma in Children, or CTAC, to provide this training at no cost. We always encourage folks to send teams to do that training. So I think we also might have some regional co-ops who have folks available in the region that can provide the training. You've gone through a train the trainer. But in any case, this really helps educators focus on applying to trauma-informed practices in their school settings. And so things like, understanding the types of trauma exposure that school-age children can experience, recognizing those signs and symptoms of trauma. Many of you who are familiar with this probably know that sometimes certain behaviors that might be associated with ADHD or other types of behavioral health issues can actually be a sign of traumatic stress. And so it's easy to mistake certain behaviors, like maybe being hypervigilant, for something like ADHD. And it's really important to kind of look at what is driving that behavior. And this training on trauma-informed practices can kind of help with that. So you can learn more about the effects of trauma on the developing brain, the impact on their students' cognitive, social, emotional, and behavioral functioning. It helps educators learn and practice school-based strategies to build resilience with their students and support their improved self-regulation to help mitigate those traumatic events, the effects that those traumatic events have had on them. It also helps staff recognize when they may have feelings of or experiencing secondary traumatic stress or exposure. We know that it can be really tough to work day in, day out with students who've experienced a lot of trauma, and sometimes that becomes its own secondary traumatic experience for those educators that are working with them. And so it talks about some strategies on how to mitigate that for our own staff. But, in addition to all of the things that it can really help with students on, it also helps folks be prepared to meet the requirements of that School Safety and Resiliency Act and the trauma-informed approaches that are a part of that legislative requirement. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we really encourage folks to participate in this training as part of a team, because you really want to have folks all on the same page. I think, school counselors are, I think, outlined in the Act to be the sort of the lead for rolling out these trauma-informed approaches in schools, but we have a lot of other, staff in the schools that can be involved in that process as well, like school social workers, school psychologists, other folks. And so that team approach, as with PBIS and other multidisciplinary work that's already happening in your schools, that team approach is really important. And I will add, what's not listed here too is that if you participate in the training through CTAC, and again, there are others that might be providing this training, but the CTAC training is what's supported directly by the Department of Education. They have, a learning collaborative where, I'm not sure if it's monthly or quarterly, but they create a space for folks to come together and have some peer-to-peer exchanges about different strategies that they've been implementing, some problems of practice that they've been struggling with, and can get that feedback from their peers on how to address those issues. Next slide, please. So, Catch My Breath. It's newer to us, but hopefully some folks in this group have heard of it as well. But we all know that vaping is a very hot topic in our schools right now. And so we have been partnering with the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities on some different evidence-based strategies and programming that schools can implement to help address this issue. I think our perspective is that vaping is a behavior that's probably caused by some underlying issue. And so what can be helpful is really addressing that issue. And so this is an evidence-based youth vaping prevention program. So it's not necessarily for intervention, but it is a prevention program that is has been shown to reduce a student's likelihood to vape. It's aligned to national and state standards. It can be taught by individuals who serve youth in grades 5 through 12, including educators and other state government agencies, public health specialists, and community volunteers. This is another program that is student-led and adult moderated, kind of like Sources of Strength. So again, this is something that is free to implement. I think almost everything that I'll be talking about in this is going to be free to implement. There might be some materials costs for some of them, but we might be able to help out with that as well. So next item, next slide, please. This is always something that folks want to know about. I'll talk about Medicaid reimbursement at a very high level because that is not my area of expertise, but I can, I've been involved in some conversations about how the State Department of Medicaid is really trying to help schools maximize the Medicaid dollars that can be used to provide mental health supports in schools. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then if folks have questions, I can share more about who to follow up with if that's something you're interested in pursuing. But I get questions all the time because we have some, there are some funds available to help support those mental health counselors in schools, but sometimes it's maybe not enough to pay for a full salary, or it's grants that are going away or things like that. So I get questions all the time about this. And so Medicaid is something that we want to try to encourage folks to consider as part of the puzzle that that can be used to support those roles. Schoolsafety.gov has a grants finder tool. That's part of the Federal School Safety Clearinghouse, which is a collaborative among multiple federal agencies that all have a role in school safety. So that could be the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Department of Education, SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So all those federal agencies collaborate to create this Federal School Safety Clearinghouse, and that website pulls from all those different agencies to see what kind of grant funding might be available to support mental health related initiatives in your schools. Some of you may know that there are state grants for school-based mental health services providers. Those grants, I think, are only something like $43,000 per district, which obviously is not enough to cover every school in most districts, unless you're a single school district. But that is some funding that is available from the state level. And again, I get questions sometimes about whether that's going to, be available the following year. That's something that is appropriated by our legislature. So as long as they continue to put that in the budget, that will continue to be available. And then the Safe Schools Flexible Focus Funds, that's another source of state funding that folks can tap to help pay for some of those mental health services. Excuse me. And then the next item is a link to our competitive grants page from KDE. The information on that website changes periodically. So I know a few years ago, we had at the federal level, the Bipartisan Safer Community Act, BISCA, Bipartisan Safer Community Act. That's the federal legislation that was passed after the Uvalde tragedy. And so part of that legislation included Stronger Connections grants, which some of you may have received for your school district. There were also a few different mental health professionals type of grants that were only available directly to school districts or schools. And then there are other things that come up that might be sent down to to the state level that we then have to run a grant competition for the school districts or schools to apply for. And so all those different types of programs, they can change depending upon what's happening at the federal level, but that's where you'll find any of those opportunities that become available is on that competitive grants page. And then finally, the Title IV Part A grant is a federal program that our division administers. It has three components, which is well-rounded education, effective use of education technology, and then the safe and healthy students component is the part that is most closely aligned with funds that can be leveraged to support mental health initiatives. Again, those are funds that come to the district. The district creates a plan for how they want to use those funds. And so sometimes they might be using those funds to support mental health services in your school, individual schools. So that's something that if you're not already involved in, that they can, you might want to talk to your Title IV or your federal programs coordinator about, because they do have to do a needs assessment for the district to determine how the different funds or different components of that fund are going to be spent. But there are a lot that are using their Title IV dollars to help support mental health services in schools. Okay, so next slide, please. These are some examples of the type of activities that you can fund through that safe and healthy students component. So some of the same topics that I've already mentioned in terms of bullying prevention, suicide prevention, PBIS, trauma-informed practices. It does also include dropout prevention, which we know that many times students drop out because of mental health issues or not feeling connected or engaged with school, or some other things that may have an underlying mental health component. We've talked about the fact that there are some serious concerns in our schools about substance use, as well as violence, that we can take a preventative approach for. So those Title IV funds can be used for that. So all these different things that you see here are ways that these are examples, and so it's not limited to these, but these are some of the examples that are commonly used, schools are used or districts are using these funds. Next slide, please. So this is where I'm going to talk about Medicaid, and I have to admit these slides actually came from someone in our Office of Finance and Operations, who is the point person for Medicaid. So I won't be able to go into much detail about these, but I did want to kind of share these with you to raise your awareness around what some of the options are for school-based Medicaid services and how they can be leveraged for mental health supports. And then again, I can connect you to some additional folks if you have questions later. But these are, services that are medically necessary, provided to children who are eligible under Medicaid, and offered to all students at no cost to students. So you might have a mental health provider in your school who is able to bill for some of the students that they see to Medicaid, and other students, maybe they bill to their private insurance, and for the other students who, for neither of those would be applicable, then maybe the school district or the school, fills in the remaining dollars, or maybe you have a grant that's able to do that. So those are some ways you might think about how multiple funding sources could be braided to sort of support those mental health service providers in the services that they provide to the students. So there's a clinical evaluation, observation and interviews for the students that might be receiving these services in the different areas of functioning that you see listed there. Next slide, please. For the mental health treatment services, that could be individual therapy or counseling, as well as group therapy or counseling. And so some examples of group therapy would be building and maintaining healthy relationships, personal goal setting, etc. And then each group session would be relative to all of the children participating. Next slide, please. I'm just gonna, I think, will these slides be shared out with the group after this training?
Yes, they have them.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm not going to go through each of these, but wanted to have them in here just for your reference because as you can see, there are a number of different types of professionals who are eligible for billing Medicaid. And so you'll have those to reference. And so if you do some follow-up, if you want to go to the very last slide, this is who you can follow up with to explore Medicaid further. So the first step would really be to contact your director of special education, since historically Medicaid, until we had, I think, expanded care, Medicaid services in schools were primarily for just students with special education needs. And since we've had some changes in how that's being administered through Medicaid, it's, I think, expanded some of the options that are there for who are not special ed students. But in any case, historically, the director of special education is the person who's kind of helped manage that process. So definitely follow up with your dose around that. And then the person at KDE who's able to answer any questions that might be needed is Lindsay Kimbleton, who's in our Office of Finance and Operations. I will say that I'm on some interagency groups with the state Medicaid office, and they are definitely trying to kind of promote schools and make it easier for them to bill Medicaid for mental health services. This is something that they, I think, even received a special grant to help schools leverage this funding more effectively. So they're definitely, you know, it may not be easy right now, but they're definitely trying to make it easier and more accessible for schools and districts to do that, and are interested in trying to help folks figure that out. So with that being said, are there any questions that I can answer about this work? Is there anything that you were hoping to hear about that I didn't cover? If not, I think my information is did I put my email address? I did not put my email address on the first slide, so I'll put that in the chat in case anyone has some follow-up questions for me. You're welcome to reach out to me. Again, if it's Medicaid specific, please reach out to Lindsay Kimbleton. And happy to talk further.
All right, Christina, thank you for being here. We appreciate your insight. And now we move on to our principal partnership project with Keith and Emily.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for letting us address our new website. We are excited about this move, but there are some things within the move that we wanted to get your feedback on. I don't know if you are familiar with our current website or not. I hope you are. I hope you've been there before to see some of the professional learning opportunities that are there and some of the resources that we have housed on our current website. We are going to move all of the things from our website to the new OELE website, which is currently the Go Teach page. If you've been to the Kentucky Go Teach, that is where all of our principal partnership project items will now be housed starting in April. And so we're just trying to get, as we make this move, to be efficient with what is on that site. We would love to get your feedback for, hey, this is something that I go to your website for, or I utilize your website for often, or this is something that is missing from your website that would really be helpful to me as a principal. We would love to get all of that kind of feedback. So I've put in the chat our current website, and if you can click on there and open that up, you'll see that it's got like professional learning options in there, when we offer initial certified evaluation training and update training and the things that we offer as far as professional learning goes. If you click all the way over on the right, you'll see there are some P-Cell tools that you might find useful. The principal calendar is something that folks find useful at times that's on there. And then there's just like a list of resources that has things like the 1 million acronyms that we use in Kentucky, and they're just all listed out there so that principals can have access to those. If there's one that you are in the middle of an ARC and you don't know what that acronym means, you can look it up on that alphabetical order. And so if there is something that you would like to share with us that like, this is a big help to me, please make sure it makes it to the new website. We would love to hear that from you. Or if there's something that you have looked for, a resource, and you just can't find what you're looking for and would like for us to do some research to add that to the resources we offer on our website, we'd love to hear that too. You can do that in the chat, or I'll put my email in the chat, and you can just send me an email if you want to do that directly, so that can be just between us. And my lights are going off in here in the KDE. They do that every 10 minutes if I don't move enough. So Stacy, that's really all I had, unless Emily had something else that she wanted to share about the website transition.
I think that covers it. Thank you, Keith.
Okay. But we really appreciate your feedback, and we will take action based on anything that we receive from you. So thanks ahead of time.
All right, thank you both. We appreciate it. And that takes us to our adjournment. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Sarah Williams.
Thank you. We have a motion.
Tim Klein, second.
We have a second. Okay, thank you very much. Before I call for all in favor, make sure you click on that link there to provide feedback about today's meeting. It will give us information about how things went and possible topics for next meeting. It looks like June 3rd is the next meeting, and we may all be still in school at that time, given the nature of this year. So I know we will be here in Boyd County. So I'll wish you guys good luck at the rest of the meeting and the rest of the day, the rest of this week. And I will say all in favor of adjournment, state you're ready.
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you guys for being here.